Hello folks, this is Steve AB4L. First thing I want to say is nothing in this episode is a promotion nor is a recommendation, but just as importantly you have to remember that I'm just an idiot running my mouth. Sometimes I read things online and I kind of look to see what really happened. I used to live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I used to live less than a mile from WRAL television station. They're on Western Boulevard on one side of NC State campus. I lived on a street on the other side of NC State campus for a while. As a matter of fact, the video I put up about my hurricane path prediction was based on their weather radar page. So I was looking at the news a few minutes ago. Now here's a sad one. Body of 14-year-old boy swept away near Topsail Beach, washes ashore on Camp Lejeune base. Now that's down at the Outer Banks. That's what it's called. The Atlantic coastline of North Carolina is called the Outer Banks because there's a series of islands those have been there for 100 million years. Those have been there for 100 million years when this part of North Carolina was underwater. He went in the water at North Topsail Beach, and then when they couldn't find him, but his body washed up at the Marine Training Center, Camp Lejeune. I've known two people who trained there. And it actually isn't too far away, but it's in an inlet. It kind of suggests something about currents. So I looked at that one, and I looked at the map. See, I like to explore. But then I saw another item as I was looking down. One woman dead, at least 15 firefighters injured, battling South Hill Fertilizer warehouse fire. Crews to remain on property for several days. Now maybe a year ago, or was it 2 years ago, there was a fertilizer plant fire up in the Greensboro area, and I made a video or two about that. In Israel, I saw a cotton bale storage building catch fire, and how you couldn't put it out. A couple of years ago, an ammonium sulfate storage warehouse in Beirut, Lebanon, exploded and destroyed half the city. Why would I be interested in that other than I was in Beirut for a few days in 1966 when it was called the Paris of the Eastern Mediterranean. I don't think it looks that way today. One woman dead, at least 15 firefighters injured, battling South Hill. I've been all over North Carolina, and I knew right away this wasn't in North Carolina. Fertilizer warehouse fire, crews to blah, blah, blah. Driver who crashed into Virginia plant sparking massive fire has died. A woman is dead. And a dozen firefighters were injured at a fire on Saturday at a fertilizer warehouse in South Hill, Virginia. According to preliminary investigation by the South Hill Police Department, the fire started after a woman drove into a Nutrient Ag Solutions facility. That's the name of a business. Ag is agriculture. Nutrient agricultural solutions are liquid fertilizers that can be sprayed in the field. But presumably they start as dry chemicals that are then mixed up to order, including micronutrients for the particular crop, and maybe even some weed control. The fire started after a woman drove into a Nutrient Ag Solutions facility on West Danville Street and hit a propane tank inside. Where did they have the tank that somebody could run into it? Oh, she must have gone wild inside of there, but listen to the rest of the story. Authorities said the crash knocked the propane tank 10 to 20 feet, and the propane tank began shooting flames like a flamethrower. Apex safety, handling compressed gas cylinders. I'm going to pick one picture. A long time ago, I worked for a commercial chemical company in the research laboratories synthesizing new organic compounds. I've made a video where one day, using a cylinder like one of these, that size, compressed hydrochloric gas, which is a liquid inside, not aqueous, with a hose into the hood, running the reaction, bubbling it in, and I had just stooped down next to that to do a reading, stood up, stepped over to my desk 10 feet away, sat down, and the hose exploded and the cylinder began shooting liquid hydrogen chloride, not aqueous hydrogen chloride, liquid gas. It would have killed me on the spot. When I first went to work for that company, on the first day in the lab, I was required to read the safety manual. One of the key required readings was a page discussing those kinds of cylinders and what happens if you don't have the cap on and you knock the valve off. And the little monograph told how that happened in one of the labs, and the cylinder went like a rocket banging through 3 cinder block walls. They also talked about their chemical production labs, facilities down in Texas, where they had an accident at one of them that it was so explosive that it destroyed 500 buildings and structures of all sizes. Now, why am I going through this with you? I want you to understand what we're about to look at, and why, in my mind, there's some question about how this story has been written up. The one in Virginia. Okay? These cylinders have got like 3,000 pounds per square inch. 3,000 pounds per square inch is the compression. I remember it on the gauges. Back to the story. Several employees told WRAL News no one was inside when the fire started. How did she drive in? No one was inside. How did she drive in? Because they were given the weekend off for Independence Day. How did she drive in if it was closed? The woman had multiple burns and they airlifted her to a hospital and she died. Authorities say they don't know what caused the woman to crash into the warehouse, adding that they're taking her body to the medical examiner's office and conducting toxic. They want to see if she was drunk or whatever. Now, July 6th, that's what the fire looked like. What we can see is this entire building here is engulfed, and I'm going to show it to you. There's a narrow street between this and this building across the street, which is also on fire. My thought on this was, there was an explosion, it started a fire, the explosion or the tank may have penetrated cinder block walls and rocketed around. What did I just tell you a few minutes ago about my very first required reading, my first day in the lab? The blaze occurred on a day when the heat index was over 100 degrees. The place contains lots of fertilizers and chemicals, so I knew right off it wasn't going to be an easy fire with a very old warehouse. Okay, now let me show you something. The name of the company they gave was Nutrient Ag Solutions, 501 West Danville Street. All I had to put in was Nutrient Ag Solutions location on West Danville, and the search engine knew exactly. So that's no problem finding it. And when I then said, show me it on the map, Google search, Google Maps, no trouble. No trouble at all. Now, I can tell that this is in an old part of South Hill. Let's see what happens when I do this. Now remember where this is right here. I want to close this for a moment. How can I tell that this is in an old part of South Hill, Virginia. Here's the Newt Aggregate Solutions South Hill. This building, as it turns out, is also the same. This is West Danville Street, and right here, coming into it at an angle, is Plank Road. A road like that goes back to colonial times. They're in a part of Virginia when it rains, it gets totally muddy. Wagon wheels and horse hoofs sink in, and in order to move commerce, they built plank roads. They cut trees down, sliced them in half, and laid them on the ground next to each other like railroad ties, but right next to each other. And then you had to pay to use the plank road. The nearest plank road I know of is about 20 miles from here. Yes, North Carolina had plank roads too. Now, I'm just telling you how my brain works. I noticed a bunch of things. So this is in an old part of the city. Nutrient Ag Solutions South Hill. There's the warehouse. There's some kind of lot here. I don't know what the Shepherd's Inn is. What's this? What's this building? Let's find out. Let's go to Street View. Now, Plank Road is this one up here. You see the water tower? Do you see the slanting road up here? That's Plank Road. I'm orienting you. This is Nutrient Ag Solutions, and we see a door. And this is also Nutrient Ag Solutions. And we see an entranceway. Now, if we look around, we'll assume that there's a door closed. There's a door open. We'll assume that this, when the camera went by, this was a business day. So you could drive in. What would you hit? This building is the bigger one that I showed you. That I said is the one on the other side of the street is also theirs. That's the big building, the bigger building. But as I looked at this, I noticed something. Let's go down kind of toward the Plank Road. See, the Plank Road's over there. What are these two things out here? Now look at over on this side. Let's close the images. Next to this door, they've got a fire symbol. This warehouse with a higher up thing, there used to be a loading dock here. A small one, but there used to be a loading dock. There's no reason to build this up like this. The floor is up here, and the proof of it is there's a cellar. See the small windows? This building is Nutrient Ag Solutions, and what is, see, I have to move along. What are those two things? What are those two things? What are they doing there? And look at, there's a line that goes up into here. What are those two things? Let me ask you again. What are those two things? Well, I looked at it really close. I looked at it really close, and I could see the words Service Plus. Now it's starting to say Service Plus Home Warranty, Service Plus Distributors. That turns out to be a specialized kind of auto part. Service Plus Inns and Suites Calgary. What if I just say Service Plus South Hill, Virginia? Service Plus Propane, South Hill, Virginia. Propane tanks and services near South Hill, Virginia. The name of the company is Service Plus Propane. And this is the wording I can see on that tank reading in the Street View. That's how I found them. I get mine from a company that's just 2 miles down the road. I got a propane tank out here. It's not quite the same, but it's the same kind of style as this one. Except it's not on the street. It's next to the house, away from the road. Why am I yelling? That's like the tank I've got outside. What would happen if somebody just rammed into it? What do you think? What do you think would happen? Did she really drive? When they say she drove into the warehouse, do they mean she drove into a door in a closed facility? Or is it kind of funny the way the people at WRAL understood what was being said to them and they wrote it the best way they could? That what she really did was she went up on the sidewalk and rammed those things. They exploded and went like rockets. There's two of them. One of them could have gone through that wall, and the other one could have gone through this wall, and both places are on fire. What do you think? This is all a hypothesis. I'm just an idiot running my mouth. I wasn't there. I don't think anybody saw it happen. But what we know from the picture is both of these buildings were on fire. And there's two tanks. One could go in one direction and the other can go in the other. That's my hypothesis. Now, just for fun, this view is July 2023. It's pretty up to date. It's more dates. Let's see what it looked like in July 2022. Now, I don't think this is drive up for you to get gas from them. I think this line up the wall feeds something inside of that building. And just as there's a tank outside of my back porch with a pipe that goes down into the ground, in through a cellar wall opening, and ends up over, you can't see it, over here at my fire logs in the fireplace here in this room. they're doing something like that there. Only the tanks are on the street. Oh, they're on the sidewalk. Do you see anything protecting them? People are honest, they wouldn't steal them. (2019). Yeah, they're there. 2018. Yeah, they're there. 2013. They're there. Wait a minute. All right, 2008. Oh, I thought it wasn't going to be there. It's just in a different place. You see? I can't make out the name of that company. This is 2008. So at least back to 2008, the fire department and the fire inspector in South Hill, Virginia, permitted a 115-gallon propane tank to be sitting on the street unprotected. Because nobody would be stupid enough to drive a car or truck up there and hit it. You see why I'm making the video? Remember, the people at WRAL that wrote up the story, trying to do the best they can, were not on the scene. They're listening to people talk to them, and then they're trying to make something they can present on their website or verbalize. So the tank used to be over here, Crop Production Services. This used to be called Crop Production Services. The fire warning thing here, that's for firefighters when they come, so they would have some idea of what the type of material is inside the building. Not by naming it, but by its fire hazard classification. Isn't that a smart idea? Instead of one tank over there by the entrance, they moved it over here, and they got two tanks. Every once in a while, they got to come over and move the hose over to the other one. So what do you think actually happened? Is it anything like I'm suggesting? I mean, I wasn't there. What the hell do I know? And I'm assuming that this company is just a successor to the one that was there before. There's consolidation going on, who knows? And the people at WRAL did the best they could to write it up at a distance, because this incident's actually up in Virginia, and I'm going to try something. Can 100-gallon propane tanks be left on the sidewalk? Let's see if there's any AI. May I lay my 100-gallon propane tank on its side during use? But that's not what I'm asking. Can a 100-pound propane tank be transported on its AmeriGas? All about propane tanks, regulations, sizes, and placement. Is it okay to store my 100-pound propane tank here? Serious question. It must have had a picture. Yeah, it must have had a picture. Oh no, the original post was deleted by the original poster. I'll bet you it's because it was getting him into trouble. You see where I'm going? Types of propane tanks and tank replacement regulations. Above ground tanks, 125 gallons, that's what I have. Horizontal profile, placed on your property, typically in an out-of-the-way location. More on that below. This is the first time I'm reading this. More on that below. That's what I'm looking for. We're researching this. Vertical tanks, where to place your propane tank. After you decide on size and type, it's time to figure out where the propane tank will be located on your property. As a homeowner, your priority may be maintaining curb appeal or maximizing yard space. At the same time, your goal will be to allow easy access to the tank, and more importantly, I'm reading it. Importantly, comply with safety regulations. The very first thing we check off is where can we place the propane tank list is safety code. Propane tanks are installed following regulations established by the National Fire Protection Association, specifically NFPA 58. It's the first time I'm reading this. The code that addresses all aspects of propane safety. One of the rules with the greatest impact on residential propane tank deals with placement. The NFPA established minimum distances to reduce the risk of fire in a relatively rare case of a propane tank leak. One of the things they send every year to me, I'm a customer, is a safety bulletin, and one of the things that's right on the front is if you can smell it, something like a little skunk, get out of the house and call for help. Get out of the house right away and call for help. These tank location standards also keep the propane exhaust from escaping into building interiors. For answers, the key numbers to keep in mind are 5, 10, and 25. For 125 to 500 gallon propane tanks, the distance is at least 10 feet from any building or from any property line. I'm reading this commercial propane company explaining the national standard, the legal insurance standard. You understand that? For 125 to 500 gallon propane tanks, the distance is at least 10 feet from any building or from any property line. Now, when they get to talking about tanks smaller than 125, they must be placed at least 10 feet from windows or air conditioners. Air conditioners can be a source of spark. And they must be placed at least 5 feet from any crawl space openings. And then they have a chart that you can just look it up. So let's go back and look and see if those propane tanks meet the standard. Looks to me like those tanks are at least 10 feet from the brick wall, which would place them at the edge of the curb or in the road. Those tanks look to be smaller than or coming close to being 100. When I think of mine, which is up on something, these two tanks are the same size as mine. Each of these are like 100, nominally 100-gallon. They're just over that, so that you still have residual in the bottom when it goes to zero, because you usually fill no more than 100 gallons at a time. But there's actually like a little bit more in there. All I'm doing is reading online information and looking at the street view picture. And then I'm looking at one woman dead, at least 15 firefighters injured battling the South Hill Fertilizer warehouse fire. And then remember, the people writing this are hearing it over the telephone or whatever, and they're trying to make sense of it. And it said that they hit a propane tank inside. They're making an assumption. I think the propane tanks that were hit were the ones we're seeing on the sidewalk. And I think that when they exploded, one went through the wall there and the other one went across the street and burned both places down. Isn't it incredible that there were two tanks there and two buildings on fire? And she drove through a door into a building. Now remember, she drove into the building. Some people listening to that would mean through an entranceway, but it also can mean she swerved and drove into the building wall where there were two propane tanks. Who knows? Steve A. for you, just an idiot running his mouth. Excuse me for going on so long. Look at it! Saying see you in 73.